A bunch of leaks for Resident Evil 8, now known as Resident Evil Village, have hit online, and it sounds like it's going to be an interesting game. The PlayStation 5 controller has officially been revealed, and the internet is, well, rather split on it. And Ubisoft joins the Nintendo Switch eShop sale going on right now, meaning your wallet is absolutely going to suffer this April. What's going on, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, let's talk about what's going on in the world of video games. So the Resident Evil series is something I hold very near and dear to my heart. I've honestly loved all of the Resident Evil games ever since the original game on the PlayStation 1. But of course, we've seen some transformations for the Resident Evil franchise. The jump from Code Veronica to Resident Evil 4 was a bit of a stark contrast in terms of gameplay styles. More recently, Resident Evil 7 just completely flipped the script about what you knew about a Resident Evil game, making it a whole new sort of experience. Of course, Capcom has been going into the backlog of Resident Evil games lately with games like Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3's remake, but it looks like the next Resident Evil game we're going to be getting is eventually going to be Resident Evil 8, which is now being known as Resident Evil Village. Now, this is coming to us from some Resident Evil ambassadors in an ambassadors program. I will have a link to the website where all this information was revealed in the description box down below. So the first thing we learned about was that there's going to be an emphasis on Chris Redfield, who has been redesigned for Resident Evil 8, now known as Resident Evil Village. It is stylized to be like Resident Evil 8, however, and I think it's good that they're returning to a classic character. Obviously, Chris was from the first Resident Evil game. He is a longtime fan favorite, and that's something that I felt like Resident Evil 7 might have been missing a bit of, was sort of that nostalgia for the other Resident Evil titles as far as having characters from that franchise in it. You're basically going to be playing in a European village with weird paranormal stuff happening, like hallucinations going on, and there's going to be a new stalker enemy known as the Witch. Now, obviously, we have seen various types of stalker enemies. Really, Resident Evil 7 was built around the stalker enemy sort of thing. We've seen things like Nemesis and, of course, Mr. X, so I'm cool with that. I think it sounds like it's going to be pretty promising. It will keep that same first-person perspective that we saw with Resident Evil 7, which I think works for the series. You know, it's definitely a bit of a change from that traditional Resident Evil style, but I do think it sounds pretty cool, and it's going to have a quarter 2021 release window, so pretty much what Capcom has been doing with these Resident Evil games as of late, releasing something early in the year for a new Resident Evil title. Now, honestly, I like the sound of this game, but I definitely think it sounds a lot like Outlast 2. If you've ever played Outlast 2, you would know that it sort of had this same sort of setting that they're describing for Resident Evil Village, and I think the Resident Evil franchise as a whole has been sort of shifting towards that Outlast style with more emphasis on things like gunplay included into it. So I think it makes it a little bit better. I do enjoy having guns and whatnot, but I'm definitely curious to see if they're going to supplement this with another Resident Evil remake, like something like Code Veronica, or maybe revisit the Resident Evil Revelations franchise. Of course, there was 2 Resident Evil Revelations games that came out, very well received games, a great mix of sort of that classic Resident Evil style with the more action-driven style, but I'm definitely very interested in this game. I think Resident Evil 7 was definitely a departure from the rest of the series, but I really enjoyed it. I've actually been playing through it again, and it's just absolutely terrifying. One of the most terrifying games of all time, and it sounds like they're laying down the groundwork for yet another terrifying situation. And of course, if you're a hardcore Resident Evil fan, you would know that some of these things, such as the hallucinations aspect, is sort of what was happening with beta types of Resident Evil 4 before it became more of an action-orientated game. So it seems like they're also looking at those classic Resident Evil games and maybe looking at things that worked in the builds and the beta builds of those games to sort of make it a new sort of game with Resident Evil 8. I'm definitely really looking forward to this game, though. I'm looking forward to more information on it, so let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this information. Is this how you want to see the Resident Evil franchise move, or would you prefer that they go back to the more classic style? Next up, Sony has been pretty quiet with the PlayStation 5, but now it looks like they're finally ready to talk about stuff, because late yesterday afternoon they revealed the PlayStation 5 controller, and of course the internet is absolutely split on this, so I kind of wanted to explore what they talked about with this controller and then talk about why the internet is split on it and maybe why they shouldn't be. So the PlayStation 5 controller is now known as the DualSense controller, no longer the DualShock branding. It'll be known as the DualSense. Of course, we did know about the haptic feedback that is going to be similar to the Nintendo Switch that gives sort of a better rumble experience. Now, you could sit here and argue and say, well, how many times has the haptic feedback really been used all that great on the Nintendo Switch? It's pretty much just rumble, but maybe developers with the PlayStation 5 will do a little bit more with it. They redesigned the triggers and said that there's going to be a stronger emphasis on the battery life of the controller, which honestly was my biggest issue with the DualShock 4 controller. It felt like whenever I would play my PlayStation 4, the controller would die within minutes. And of course, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I definitely did not like the battery life of the DualShock 4, so it's good to see that they're putting an emphasis on that. Now, the share button has been removed, and instead they've added a create button instead. They haven't said any sort of reason why and what the create button is going to do in terms of creating sort of content, I guess is what they're going for with this, but they did say that some additional details would be coming soon. Now, one of the more interesting things is that the controller is actually going to have a built-in microphone, so you won't necessarily need a headset to talk to people while playing a game. Now, they did say for longer game sessions, you may want to pick up something like a headset, but as someone who uses the microphone very rarely in my games, I'm usually just barking out commands or saying some swear words or something like that. I think the built-in microphone is a nice feature. That's definitely something that I will enjoy with this controller. Now, the handles of the controller are definitely more elongated. You know, the DualShock 4 controller was definitely a bit stumpy, it looked like, with the handles, whereas they've elongated the handles and made it look more sort of like an Xbox One controller, which I think is a pretty cool thing. Now, the most interesting thing to me about this controller has to be the two-tone color scheme of this controller, because I think this is going to have to be indicative of what the system is going to look like. When you look at pretty much every system that's ever released, the controller color scheme is indicative of what that console looks like. So is the PlayStation 5 going to be a two-tone looking console? I would think so. Like, it almost reminds me of that Xbox 360 that came out, the Star Wars edition Xbox 360, that same sort of color scheme. Now, honestly, I'm not a huge fan of this color scheme for the controller. I think, you know, something like a standard all black would look better, but I do think it is interesting, and at least they're trying something different. And a few more focal points are that it has USB-C charging port on it, and the touchpad remains and is slightly bigger, and the light bar that was on top of the DualShock 4 controller is now moved onto the sides of the touchpad. So overall, I think it's a pretty cool looking controller. I'm not really sold on the color scheme of it, but it's kind of crazy how the internet is already split on this. There's so many people saying that the Xbox Series X controller is a better controller than the DualSense controller coming to us from Sony for the PlayStation 5, and I'm like, how can you say that? Like, when it comes to controllers, looking at the last generation of controllers, the DualShock 4, the Xbox One controller, and the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, I would say that the DualShock 4 controller was the best looking controller. But when it came down to actually playing games, I preferred the Xbox One controller or the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, just because it feels better in your hands. You can't really judge a controller as far as what's going to be a better controller until you get these controllers in your hands. It's pretty much just sparking the embers of the console wars and the console fanboy wars and stuff like that, but I'm definitely not going to write off the PlayStation 5 controller just because it looks a little bit different than the PlayStation 4 DualShock 4 controller. I think it could be a really good controller. I obviously want to get both of these controllers in my hands, but I definitely think it's very cool that Sony is now starting to talk about the PlayStation 5 system, and who knows, maybe we'll actually get a console reveal soon. And finally, a couple days ago on the channel, we talked about a big April Nintendo Switch eShop sale. And then a couple days ago on the channel, we talked about how Sega had joined the eShop sale with some really great deals. I've actually been playing Valkyria Chronicles 4. It is absolutely awesome. I highly recommend you pick up that game. But now another company has gotten involved, and that company is, of course, Ubisoft. So I briefly want to go over the highlights of the Ubisoft sale for the Nintendo Switch eShop. All of these sales are active from today until April 20th. 420 blaze it if you're one of those kids. So yeah, let's just go over these games very briefly. The first game is the game that I definitely recommend the most. It has the new thing we're doing with these eShop related stuff, and that is Child of Light Ultimate Edition. You can get Child of Light Ultimate Edition for just $4.99. Now, if you like platforming games and you like RPG games, Child of Light Ultimate Edition is definitely a great steal at just $5. It is a side-scrolling RPG game, but what's cool about the game is, yes, it does have sort of that turn-based RPG style, but you can manipulate the time of the turn-based RPG style that definitely makes it feel a lot more action orientated. It is an absolutely beautiful game. The Ultimate Edition comes with all of the DLC from the previous release of the game and a local co-op mode exclusively for the Nintendo Switch. Just a fantastic game, kind of a bit artsy-fartsy and a little bit on the short side in terms of gameplay, but for $5, you can't beat it, so I definitely recommend that game if you only pick up one game. A couple more highlights include Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. You can get the Standard Edition for just $14.99, or the Gold Edition that comes with the DLC, such as the Donkey Kong stuff that came out for it, for just $19.99. Beautiful game, beautiful visuals, really fun, great writing. If you haven't picked up this game yet, like, what are you waiting for? The Assassin's Creed Rebel Collection is once again on sale for $23.99. Assassin's Creed 4, Assassin's Creed Rogue in one simple collection for the Nintendo Switch. It's honestly just worth it for Assassin's Creed 4. I absolutely love that game. So if you only pick it up for one thing, Assassin's Creed 4, I definitely think it's worth it. The Switch version is absolutely fantastic. South Park Fractured But Whole is available for $14.99, and Stick of Truth is available for $11.99. Now, of course, these games are very fun, sort of RPG style games set within the South Park universe. I think everyone can use a laugh during these times right now, and I absolutely love the writing in both of these games. I might actually pick up Stick of Truth again. I played it back on the 360. I never checked out the Switch version, but for 12 bucks, I don't know, I might once I finish Valkyria Chronicles 4. And the final game I want to highlight is Rayman Legends Definitive Edition, $9.99. Arguably one of the best 2D platformers on the Nintendo Switch, arguably one of the best 2D platformers of all time. People absolutely love this game. It's absolutely gorgeous. It absolutely plays fantastic as well. And it's just sort of a game that sort of flew under the radar for whatever reason when it comes to talking about great 2D platformer games. But for 10 bucks, like, you can't beat it. So there's some definite really good stuff going on here. All right, so that is going to do it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed all this information. Of course, the Resident Evil 8 stuff has me very excited. I think the PlayStation 5 controller looks fine, and yeah, I'm probably gonna buy some of those Ubisoft games as well, because why not just add to my backlog of games? So let me know what you think about everything in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If this is your first time on the channel, like I said, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're doing all sorts of videos on this channel. I got some interesting stuff planned for the rest of the week as well. Be sure to check out the other videos I've uploaded recently, like the other eShop videos, if you want to just spend more money on stuff, I guess. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.